This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. Underwear drawers are like the Wild West. You never know what you're going to pull out or what shape it's in. So upgrade your collection with the buttery soft comfort of MeUndies. MeUndies' signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. Plus, it's breathable and oh so comfy, making it ideal for all-day wear. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/Spotify with code SPOTIFY. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify, code SPOTIFY.
Which Manning brother will win the FanDuel Kick of Destiny 3 on Super Bowl Sunday? Peyton or Eli? Watch the showdown live on Super Bowl Sunday. Plus, new customers bet $5 and get $200 if your bet wins. Only on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
21 plus and present in Virginia. Must be first online real money wager. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hello, Beat Check listeners. This is Joe Freeman, senior writer from the Oregonian and OregonLive, and your host today. When Oregon became the third state in the United States to legalize recreational marijuana use, proponents were seeing a double dose of green. Residents were given a chance to light up legally, finally bringing the state's underground cannabis culture out of the shadows. Savvy entrepreneurs enjoyed an opportunity to cash in, constructing a new economic sector from the ground floor. For years, business boomed. Marijuana sales surged past $1 billion, flooding state coffers with hundreds of millions in tax dollars while creating 20,000 jobs across the state. Nowadays, Oregon boasts twice as many cannabis shops as Starbucks coffeehouses. But a decade into Oregon's grand green experiment, the business of marijuana has reached a crisis. Industry heavyweights are abandoning the state, walking away from billion-dollar investments. Homegrown businesses are struggling to pay bills and taxes. Insiders are worried about the economic viability and future of the industry. How did we get here? What are pot proponents doing to fix the problem? And what will the future of Oregon's cannabis business look like? Here to answer those questions and more is Mike Rogoway, who covers Oregon technology and the state economy for the Oregonian and OregonLive. Mike, thanks so much for joining Beat Check today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe.
How's your day going?
It's pretty good.
Good. Yeah, busy as always, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's full. There's always something to juggle. There's always something happening.
Yes. Well, we're living in a very busy time, so very, very busy times. And there's a lot going on here to unpack with this story in particular, Mike. Maybe we should start with the early years. Voters approved legal marijuana in 2014. Pot shops opened in the following fall. Oregonians flocked to them, and the industry saw a steady rise in profits. I guess, can you kind of detail the early rise and lead us into how and when things kind of peaked?
Yeah, there was an immediate market for marijuana that nobody's surprise. Once the shops began opening, people wanted the product, and it went from zero legal sales essentially overnight to the first full year of legalization at $500 million in legal sales across Oregon, and then it just kept climbing. And the pandemic years, 2020 and 2021, when everyone was staying home, those were, in terms of consumption, in terms of purchases, those were the boom years. It's topped $1 billion in both of those years. And it hasn't fallen off that much from there. Now we're like 960 million. It's still a big industry. I mean, in terms of sales, it's comparable to Oregon's wine industry.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I imagine for obvious reasons, it peaked during the pandemic. People were trapped at home, bars were closed. I guess just that kind of led to the rise. People were bored.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. But, there was another thing going on around the same time. And really it started from the beginning. And that's that prices were coming down. That first year when marijuana was first legal in Oregon in 2016 for just a few months, it was $10 a gram. But the price steadily fell, and a cheap high is appealing to some people. It is very affordable.
Yeah. And I believe it's dipped down to under $4 a gram, right?
Yeah, it's been that way for very nearly 2 years now that the prices have been that low, and they're not rising. December, the latest month for which we have figures, it's the lowest on record, 351 a gram.
Well, that sounds great for consumers. I guess, when you look at the issues, I guess, for dummies like me who only casually pay attention to the industry, I imagine it's surprising to hear that the business is kind of in dire straits, because there seems to be a cannabis shop on every corner. I've long heard that the profits and tax revenue exceeded expectations. So I guess what's the problem here?
Well, I think you're right about sales, at least, and sales exceeded expectations, and I think you'd say the same thing for the amount that was produced. But this is sort of the problem that we had. Oregon, for a couple reasons, didn't put any ceiling on how many licenses it would issue for marijuana growers and retailers. And it turns out, Joe, that marijuana grows like a weed in Oregon. And so we can produce a bountiful crop very easily here. The fundamental problem we have is our population, Oregon's population, isn't large enough to consume all the marijuana that we produce. And with no limits on how much people can grow, growers and retailers jumped into the business, snapped up licenses, and went to work. And so we produced an awful lot. And I think there was a strong belief back in 2016, as you said in your introduction, we were the third state to legalize this. I think there was a strong belief that we were on the vanguard of something that would soon be nationwide. And folks were right. We were on the vanguard of something. Now it's 24 states have recreational marijuana is legal. But nationally, that hasn't happened. And there's no prospect right now of it happening. Republicans control both houses of Congress and the White House, and there's no appetite for federal legalization. Failing that, there was some hope that at least, there would be, that folks would allow interstate commerce, that you'd be allowed to sell your marijuana outside the state to other states where it's legal. The feds haven't moved in that direction either. So what we have is just economics 101. Our supply is nearly boundless, but the demand is constrained within Oregon's borders, or at least the legal demand is. And so that just keeps pushing the price down, down, and down. And, we had a record harvest this last year in Oregon. We had good conditions. We had lots of growers, no wildfires, no drought. The rain fell at just the right time. So what is it? 12.3 million pounds grown last year. And they harvest most of that in the fall, mostly in October. So it was a banner year. It was great, except, with the state population flat, and people back to work, demand is not rising. It's steady, but supply keeps increasing. And so when you have an imbalance of supply and demand, you're going to push prices down. As I say, economics 101. And this has been, again, upon a chronic problem that Oregon has had really for the past several years. And so for the retailers who have these licenses, they want to make the most of them. They don't want to surrender their license or give up. But it's just really hard to make money in this business. As you say, the shops are everywhere. A lot of marijuana, a lot of cannabis is being grown, but the demand is sort of at its ceiling, it appears.
Yeah, I think perhaps most people know, but not everyone does. It is illegal federally, of course. So that means you can't ship marijuana across state borders, even to the 22 other states that have, it is legal. And if that loophole or that, I guess, prohibition was lifted, I would think we would see another boom in the state just because of the environmental factors. Like you said, I mean, there's a lot of green in this green state.
Right. You're exactly right. Now, I think we don't know yet how much demand, if interstate commerce were legal, how much demand there would be for Oregon-grown cannabis. Other states, California and Washington, had similar problems. They also grow abundantly there. And I think even states where you wouldn't think it's naturally appealing, growing hasn't been the issue in states where it's legal. And so I think it's an open question at this point, whether interstate commerce or federal legalization would rescue Oregon's industry or not. It would probably help to a degree, but I don't know that it would necessarily solve our problems. It might be that every state, comes up with this problem because, as we said, it's not difficult to grow.
Is it a problem for business owners or that it's an all cash business? Does that matter?
Yeah, 100%. It matters, and this has been something the industry has been hoping from the beginning that the feds would lighten up on because it's illegal. You're not allowed to do business with federally chartered banks, and so it makes it very difficult to borrow money to run your business, and it makes it somewhat risky just to do transactions because a lot of your transactions are in cash. And as folks know, Portland has had sort of an endemic issue with burglaries or robberies of cannabis shops. And there's often been violence associated with that because people assume there's lots of cash on hand. The industry has taken steps to secure themselves and reduce its exposure, but it still looks like low-hanging fruit to some criminals, and it continues to be a target. So it's both a business obstacle. It makes doing business more complicated, and it's a security risk.
So, well, I have a random question, and you might not be able to answer this, but where is all this marijuana? We've got millions of pounds. Is it just sitting in greenhouses or in bunkers across the state?
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't last forever once it's grown. But I'm not an expert on that. But essentially, it gets processed and, sold, and they move through it relatively quickly, which is part of the reason prices go down. But I'm not an expert on where it physically is or what the shelf life might be.
Yeah. Now, I know you've talked to business owners just about their situations and their concerns. What are what's the general feeling? Is there lots of anxiety? Is it long-term concern? I guess just what's the feeling among people who own those businesses for their livelihood and their businesses?
I guess I would say it's frustration overall. And the first year or two, it was a really promising business, and it went very well for some people. It's been very difficult for people to find ways to make it work, and they feel that there are obstacles put in their way around regulation, even in Oregon, plus the federal regulations, the federal prohibitions, as you say. So I think they feel frustrated that more isn't being done. We've got 20,000 people or something working in this industry. It's not a small industry. That more isn't being done to protect it and to insulate it. There isn't the fundamental supply and demand issue, though. I would say that people don't have an easy solution to that, and there's probably a degree of pessimism around that.
Right. And that kind of does make me wonder, do industry leaders have ideas for reforms? Do they have, in any ways that they think might ease kind of the financial calamity that this business might be facing?
Yeah, well, essentially there's a few ideas. I mean, of course, federal legalization or interstate commerce is top of the list, but there's only so much Oregon can do on that front as one state. They want a rollback of regulations in the state, reducing testing and security protocols. They feel like they're being overregulated, that people are suspicious that, there's something about their product that is unsafe or it needs to be tested or carefully scrutinized. And they feel that that's overdone, that it adds to their costs in an industry where profit margins are already low. They want to make it easier for them to pay their taxes. And they would like the state to market cannabis in the same way that it markets Oregon wine or Oregon beer or Oregon fruits and things like that, other crops that are a large part of the state economy. Of course, that's something the state could do, but those other products are things we often market, as part of our identity in other states. And so it's difficult to say, okay, are we going to market to our own citizens? Now, it can be a a tourism draw. People could come for that reason, but
Sure.
less so now than in 2016. Now that 24 states have it legal, and there's a lot of places you can go. You don't have to come to Oregon.
Right. I believe I read, or either you intimated or you flat out you said there's still is a level of illegal sort of activity in this business, and I'm sure people weren't willing to talk openly about that, but I imagine stuff's still getting across state lines despite the prohibition.
Yeah. I mean, this is inevitable. If you have a product that is very inexpensive in one state and illegal and somewhat more expensive in other states, I mean, it's just going to happen. I think there hasn't been, and others may feel differently and have data that I haven't seen. I don't think there's been there isn't a definitive look at how much is leaking out of Oregon, how much is moving out of the state illegally. There's still a lot of illegal marijuana grow sites in Oregon. Still a lot of people growing it illegally. But among the legal grow sites, I don't think there's a great sense of just how much is being shipped out of the state.
Okay. One thing that we didn't mention was that I know one way, I guess, I don't know if it's the state or whoever regulates it, they're not issuing any new licenses for growing or selling, and they haven't since 2019. I believe you said it was kind of a 2-year temporary moratorium, and then they've extended that.
Yeah.
I imagine that's probably bad news for mom and pop kind of businesses. Is that true?
Well, I think people are okay with moratoriums right now on new licenses. It gives value to the licenses they already have. They can sell them to somebody else, or something like that. I think, I would say that the reason people get in this business is, in part, it's a passion. That people believe that this is a product that is cannabis is helpful to people. It's part of their lifestyle. It's part of their own personal care regimen. And they really, a lot of people who are in the business really believe in it strongly. Along with that comes a belief in in many people, a belief in sort of a libertarian ethos. The government shouldn't be telling you what you can and can't grow, what you can and can't use, particularly for a product that people believe in, like cannabis. And so there's a lot of ambivalence about putting a moratorium on how many licenses there can be,
right?
Because then it feels like the government is intruding. Now, what one solution you could have is to start buying back licenses and start limiting the number of licenses over time. I think that's also somewhat controversial. But I think there is a widespread sense now and acceptance that folks can't keep expanding the industry, keep allowing new players in. And it's not so much allowing new players in, but allowing the number of players to continue to expand, because the market is already difficult enough for those who are already here.
Right. We know the GOP backed, national, the Congress and Senate, they don't care. Obviously, Trump doesn't care. I wonder about Oregon lawmakers. I know that there's a lot on their plate. We have a homeless crisis. Intel's, reeling. The craft beer scene isn't what it once used to be. We just got bad news about Columbia recently. Do you get the sense that Oregon lawmakers care or are paying attention to the issue at all?
I think they want to see. I don't think there's serious opposition right now in the legislature to legal cannabis. I don't, there may be some grumbling from the Republican side of the aisle, but nobody's saying let's roll it back to where we were in 2015. But I don't think, absent a really cohesive reform plan from the industry, don't think people are really excited about going down a road to address this. Because I don't think people know the solution at this point.
Right.
People don't know quite what to do. Or at least there isn't an agreement on what's appropriate. Right. And so, from the state's point of view, in one respect, it's working. You said it's outperforming expectation. That's true. What are we doing? 160 million in taxes every year, and that's real money. And do I have that number right? Let's see.
Yeah, it was 160. Yeah,
160,
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So they use it for drug treatment and other state priorities. I think people are happy to have that money, and it isn't easy. It isn't easy to see how you might expand it from a legislator's point of view, concerned about revenue. Well, there isn't an upside for them on that. I think if the industry comes together and says, this is our agenda and we think this would make a meaningful difference in the following way, I think they could get the legislature's attention. I would not say that's on the docket for 2024 from anything I've heard. And perhaps we'll have some users, some audience, some people in our audience who are more familiar with that than I am. But I'm not seeing that from what I'm hearing out of the legislature in terms of its priorities this spring.
Yeah, so it's kind of just a ride it out, wait and see sort of mentality, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about people getting into it because they believe in it. Well, it's sort of the reason people get into journalism, I guess. It's not the lucrative profession it used to be, but we stick by it because we believe in it. And I think a lot of people in the cannabis industry feel the same way, that they'd hoped for more from it, but they still love being in the industry, and they're not inclined to leave if they don't have to.
Well, one winner in all this right now is the consumer.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you look at the last 5 years of inflation, and it's been very painful. Well, not for cannabis. It's been going the other way, getting cheaper every year. And so yeah, it is a cheap high, and it is very affordable, and there's a lot of appeal. I think that's something to consider too, is that if we did get to the point where demand were constrained in some way, prices would go up. I'm sorry, if supply were constrained in some way, prices would go up. Would demand fall? I mean, it is complicated to figure out exactly what the path forward is for the industry.
Right. Well, I think we covered everything that I can think of. Is there anything else you'd like to mention that we didn't go over, Mike?
No. I think, I don't see that we're facing a collapse of the industry. I think we should be clear about that. But it's just, especially for small businesses, it's just much more difficult, I think, than people anticipated getting into it. But as you say, it's a win. It's a win for the consumer. It's a product that's very readily accessible and very affordable. So for the time being, it's a steady state that might not be where the industry hoped it would be, but it's part of Oregon's culture and it's part of Oregon's economy, and it will be. It will be going forward.
I guess it's almost more of a crossroads than a crisis in a way. And I guess that makes sense for such a new endeavor. I mean, all the other businesses from shoes to microchips and so on and so forth have ridden the waves over the decades. Well, this business is 1 decade in, and they're kind of figuring it out as it goes.
Yeah, it is a young industry. And I think we can assume, whether or not we get national legalization anytime soon, we don't see a lot of states rolling back legalization, reinstituting prohibition. We're not seeing that. So I think in the long run, the industry's conditions are likely to improve, but it's just been much slower than people had anticipated.
Right. Well, Mike, this has been an enlightening conversation. I can't thank you enough for joining the show. If you're interested in reading Mike's coverage of the business of marijuana, I'll drop some links to his stories in the show notes, so check them out. Thanks so much for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you like this episode, give us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. And tell a friend. Help spread the word. The best way to support our journalism and stories like this one is with a subscription to the Oregonian and OregonLive. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time, I'm Joe Freeman, and this was Beat Check.